y'all, my name is Miss J, and I'm going to be going over this lesson for the strategy demo that I came up with. We're going to be going over week 10 of USA Studies Weekly, looking to the west. Now this mainly deals with manifest destiny, moving westward past the Mississippi River, the Louisiana Purchase, the Alamo, the Oregon Trail, things like that. So, our vocabulary words for this week are going to be 6 vocabulary words. Manifest destiny, of course. We're also going to be learning reservation, Oregon Trail, Pony Express, Alamo, and covered wagon as well. Those are words that are going to be coming up a whole lot through this lesson plan and this little unit that we're going to be going through. The vocabulary strategy that we'll be using to learn about these words are semantic mapping, which, as an example here, we have manifest destiny here in the middle, and then we're going to be using the semantic mapping to not only learn about the vocabulary words and what they could mean, so we could write the definition beneath these bubbles, things like that on the same page somewhere, but we're also going to be relating the vocabulary words to each other. So the Alamo is related to manifest destiny, so is the Oregon Trail since they're happening at the same time, reservation, and we can also relate it to other context clues or things that we're reminded of when we think of these words, like travel, that could be related to both manifest destiny and the Oregon Trail. Reservation could be related to the Oregon Trail, Native Americans. You could relate rebellion to Alamo, which goes back to manifest destiny, etc. And for our before reading strategy, we are going to be using what's called the Tea Party reading strategy. So what you'll do for that is you'll get index cards and you'll write clue words that you'll be reading in the story. So we'll do gold and wagon, for example. Now each of these students are going to be getting one of these cards with the vital thing, and before they go around the classroom, they're going to write on the back what they are predicting that the story is going to be about, and they'll say why they think it is. So with gold, you could predict, oh, I think this story is going to be about getting rich because I know that gold, using the background knowledge, I know that gold is something that costs a lot of money, which indicates wealth. With the wagon index card, a student could write, oh, I think this story will be about traveling somewhere because I know that wagons are a form of transportation or something like that. So let's say these two students get together and they share their predictions. After that, they come up with one prediction that incorporates both wagon and gold. So they could say, oh, I now predict that the story is going to be about taking a wagon and traveling somewhere where you can get gold to become rich, and things like that. And you could put a timer on this as a teacher. You could give them 10 to 15 minutes to write down their predictions, go around the class and share ideas, things like that. And then you could call time, get them back in their seats, and then we could make one big prediction as a class before we start reading, okay? That'll encourage conversation and critical thinking and things like that. So, for our during reading strategy, we're going to be using what's called the 3-minute pause summarization. Now that's pretty self-explanatory. During the reading that we could be using, so for example, we could be going through the westward expansion story. We could take it 3 pages at a time, for example, maybe 4. And then after those indicated pages, we could call a pause in class, and the students could summarize just for 3 minutes on what they've learned so far from the pages. Anything that they're confused about, they can write it down, and after they write it down, they could raise their hand, we could answer those questions together as a class, and you could write down the answers in your notebooks as students. That way, they're practicing writing down information, really summing it up for when they need to take further notes over things like that later on. It's really just practicing critical thinking once again, and good note-taking and comprehension and critical thinking skills. So for our after reading strategy, we're going to be using exit tickets. So exit tickets will be just a couple of questions that you as a teacher are going to write up on the whiteboard or any board in the class at the end of class before the students leave. So a couple of questions that I came up with were, some people thought it was their blank to move west, and I gave just multiple choice. You don't have to do just multiple choice questions. You can do fill in the blanks, you can do short answers, things like that. So for this one, it would be C, destiny, since some people thought it was their divine destiny to move west. And the second question that I asked is, why did Napoleon sell the Louisiana Territory to President Thomas Jefferson? Now, they could, write down because France was fighting with Britain, because they needed money, things like that. And depending on their answers, and when they write down their name, they'll jot it down, write their name on it, and put it in a little basket. Depending on their answers, when you're reading through them, you can really gauge who has comprehended it very well and who needs a little bit more scaffolding, a little bit more help, just so they can really comprehend the material that y'all are reading and the subject that you're going over, okay? All right, and for the formative assessment, you're going to be using the 3-2-1 method. So that is very, very simple. They're going to be listing 6 things total. So 3 things, they're going to be listing 3 things that they didn't know before, 2 things that surprised them as they went through this lesson, and then 1 thing that they want to do with the things that they've learned. So for example, 3 things that they didn't know before, they could have listed, let me see, the Oregon Trail is related to Native Americans and the reservations that they were forced onto. Let me see, 1 thing that they surprised them was that, for example, the Alamo is happening at the same time as the Oregon Trail. That could have surprised them. And then, et cetera, et cetera. And for the summative lesson, it's going to be a big project. The project that I've come up with for this lesson plan would be to put your student in the shoes of someone going through the Oregon Trail, or someone who has gone through the Oregon Trail. So you could, as a precursor to this, read if you were a kid on the Oregon Trail, just to get them in that mindset of, oh, well, I'm a kid and I thought of doing this and this on the Oregon Trail, or I didn't know that they ran into this and this. So they would come up with a character name, how old they are, just telling us a little bit about who they are on the Oregon Trail. They could tell us their job, if they have a family, and then the reason why they want to move west, just make it kind of a story for the students to have fun with. They could use something like, I moved during the winter and it was very harsh, and I ran into a group of Native Americans and they helped me, just like Lewis and Clark did, things like that. And then you could give the students 3 obstacles that they ran into, again using winter as the example, or they could run into maybe a bear attack or something like that. And you can also give the option of dressing up as the character for whenever they present their whole story and everything. and they could be like a two-minute presentation for the students. You can, like I said, give them the option to dress up, or they can draw their character on a piece of paper, and they can also, if you want them to, partner up, I would say, with one more person at the most, just so that they can really both put in meaningful discussion and good conversation, things like that. And that is it. Let me see. And that is part one of explaining the lesson plan to peers and everything. And we're going to be doing part two shortly. Okay. Okay, class. So, we are going to be reading through our textbook now. What we're going to be doing now that we've finished our before reading things, the tea party, like we said, we're now going to be reading through, and as we go through, we're going to stop every now and again, and we're going to write down a summary of what we've learned as we read, okay? And we're going to do this a few times, and as soon as we finish, then we'll write a whole big summary of the whole picture, okay? All right, let's do this. Okay, looking to the west. So, why westward? After the Revolutionary War ended in 1783, the United States found itself in control of all the land from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. It's quite a lot of room, huh? All right. Some settlers who had been in America for many years were beginning to feel crowded in the colonies. Now, you remember what the colonies are, right, from the previous weeks? Colonies? Right. Colonies are just a gathering. They're kind of like teeny tiny little states without being official states, right? Gotcha. All right, let's keep reading. They saw an opportunity to own more land and decided to head west to the other side of the Appalachian Mountains. Some people looked across the mountains and saw plenty of natural resources, such as lumber and furs. They also saw business opportunities in those resources. They knew they would be able to sell goods to the people who stayed in the east and to the people who moved west. Some people moved west for adventure. I know I would. Some liked the idea of being far away from other settlements, on their own in the vast wilderness. American leaders also wanted the country to be strong and safe. Spain controlled Florida and much of the Southwest, and France claimed much of the land west and northwest of the Mississippi River. England controlled the land to the north in Canada. If Americans settled these lands, it would be harder for foreign countries to continue to control them. All right, so before we move on, like we just read, they do have a lot of countries around them, right? And they just became a new nation, right? After the Revolutionary War ended, Britain backed off, and now they're fending for themselves in America. Well, that does leave them kind of open to whoever wants to try and challenge them. So that's why they wanted to move west, so that they could have more freedom, more room to breathe, things like that. Does that make sense? Okay, let's keep going. The Louisiana Purchase. By 1800, more and more settlers had crossed the Appalachians. Some had even moved as far west as the Mississippi River. The settlers needed supplies, but the Appalachians were a big problem. It would be easier to ship goods up and down the Mississippi River to the port of New Orleans. From New Orleans, people could get goods to or from the states along the Atlantic coast. The problem was that France owned New Orleans and all of the Louisiana Territory. More than 500 million acres. Holy cow. That's a lot of football fields. So, before we move on, 1800, right? It's a few years after the American Revolution now. Let me see. So, we just read that France owns one port, or a place where boats gather, and a lot of people gather to put in supplies for shops and stuff, right? France owns a very important port in Louisiana. Did you remember the name of it? New Orleans. Good job. Okay. And New Orleans is where? In Louisiana. You got it. Okay. Well, Louisiana, that wasn't a state yet. It was a whole territory. Like I said, a lot of football fields. 500 million acres. That's crazy. Okay, let's see what they do with it. President Thomas Jefferson offered to buy New Orleans from France. This would allow Americans to ship goods more easily, and France needed money to help pay for war with England. The French were ready to give up their land in North America. In 1803, French leader Napoleon Bonaparte agreed to sell not just New Orleans, but the entire Louisiana territory for a very reasonable $15 million. Now, that's a lot of money. However, when you think of how big that is, and it says just in here in the next sentence, the land doubled the size of the United States and only costs about 3 cents per acre. Can you imagine paying 3 pennies for a whole football field? That's crazy. Oh my goodness. Ugh. I guess France needed money pretty bad, huh? I guess war is pretty expensive when you think about it. Let's keep going. The Louisiana Purchase was definitely a bargain for the United States, but it wasn't good for everyone living there. American Indians had already been pushed west by the settlers. Now even more were being pushed off the land and forced to live on reservations. Remember, that's one of our vocabulary words, reservations. Areas of land set aside by the U.S. government, not by Native Americans, but the U.S. government. That's not very fair, huh? Many of the Native Americans died of starvation, harsh weather, and disease. Okay, so we're going to stop here and we're going to write out a 3-minute summary, okay? You're going to have 3 minutes to write down whatever you soaked up as we were reading, okay? Try not to look at the textbook and really just remember what you read, okay? It's okay if you don't remember everything. And if you're confused about things, just raise your hand after you write down the question and we'll answer that as a class, okay? All right, let's do that. Okay, so taking one last look. France sold the Louisiana Purchase. Okay. Now, we're going to close that down and we're going to write out for 3 minutes what we remembered reading, okay? And I'll write with you. Okay, ready? And go. Okay, so for 3 minutes. Well, I do remember, let me see, in the late 1800s, though I don't remember the year. 1700s, excuse me. 1700s, the Americans wanted to move west. Let me think. West of the Mississippi River. That's right. Past the Mississippi River. Okay. And there were some mountains. Oh, the Appalachian Mountains. That's right. Appalachian Mountains. Okay. Okay, now what else did they do? Oh, there was something standing in their way. That's right. They ran into Native Americans. Native Americans stood in the way because that's their land and they've been there for quite a long time, huh? Stood in the way, been there first, and, oh, that's right, other nations controlled land around America. That's right. Around America. Now there was one in particular that controlled a very important place that they wanted. That's right, France. France. So France sounds very important, so we'll underline that. France had a port. Remember, port is where a lot of people gathered so that they could have shipments of goods for their shops, right? So a port in New Orleans. What was the state name? Oh, Louisiana. That's right. Oh wait, it wasn't a state. Oh, it was a territory. That's right. Louisiana territory at the time. Okay. So what was the year? Let me see. So we'll have to look back in the text and see what year people started to move west, okay? So we'll put a little star by that question. And then let me think. 1803. That's right. 1803 is when Napoleon, and who remembers who Napoleon is? Who is he? Well, he's in France, okay. If they're dealing with him, if the president is dealing with him, he must run France, okay. Oh, he was the short guy, remember? Really, really short. A lot of people make jokes about him. Let's see, the short king of France. Sold the Louisiana territory to Thomas Jefferson, who was the president, for how many? I know we said it was 3 cents an acre. Oh, $15 million. That's right. 15 million, and we'll emphasize that it was 3 cents per acre. Okay, it looks like that time is up. So now that I know that we have a question, we need to go back to the textbook and look what year it was that they wanted to start moving in there. Let's see. After the Revolutionary War ended in 1783. That's what it was. So we can go back into our summary. We can do the star. 1783, when the Revolution ended. There we go. 1783. Okay. Now that we've answered questions like that, we can go ahead and keep reading, and we'll just keep repeating this throughout the class for today, tomorrow, and the next day, okay? All right.